Good afternoon. It's nice to be here. Can New England feed itself? That's the question. The answer is simple. It's yes, we can. We can. It's possible. That doesn't mean it's inevitable. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first, before we get into that, I want to begin by talking a little bit about where agriculture in New England is today, and sort of some of the fundamentals of agriculture which set the stage on how we can think about it going forward in the future. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about agriculture from the perspective of the state of Maine. And that's okay because for a couple of reasons. But I want to do it for two reasons in particular. One, it's what I know. And I'm now old enough and wise enough to know that I really should talk about things I know something about. Now, wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone applied that same standard? And second, because Maine is really a predominant force in agriculture in New England. And if we're serious about growing agriculture to a level where possibly we could be feeding all of New England, Maine would be playing an even more important role. Right now, probably of the 2 million acres that are in agricultural production in New England, about 60% of that is in Maine. If we were going to grow agricultural production, probably as much as 80 or 85% of overall agricultural acreage would be in the state of Maine. You folks, you're Boston-centered. I understand that. I went to MIT. There is another whole part of New England up there. You can fit all of the other 5 New England states inside the state of Maine. So what's going on with agriculture in Maine? And I'm going to oversimplify because it's a complicated subject and we don't have a lot of time. But you can think of it this way. There's really sort of 2 tracks in agriculture. There's this track over here, which is what a lot of people still think of as farming. And that's usually farms that are serving commodity markets. It might be dairy farms. In Maine, it would be potato farms and some large vegetable operations. It would also be brown eggs in Maine and blueberries. That's one track. Commodity-oriented, not necessarily large farms. Our largest farms in New England are small by national standards, but fairly hefty in some ways. That's one track, and it's primarily serving commodity markets. People are selling to wholesalers or they're selling to processors. The other track over here has gone by different names during the 17, 18 years I've been working on agriculture, but the term increasingly used is local agriculture. Those could be farms growing the same product as this track over here. They may be organic, they may be conventional. What distinguishes them is not so much what they're growing, but how they are marketing it. They are marketing direct or close to direct. So they're cutting out the middlemen. They're not selling commodities. They're selling products with a face in some instances, many instances. They're selling through a farm stand. They're selling through a CSA. They're selling direct sales to local stores. Stores ideally where the identity of that farm is still maintained at the point of purchase, so it's not a commodity. So 2 tracks. 2 tracks. Now on this track over here, this commodity-based agriculture, the story in New England is that it's been going down and down and down and down for a long time. Agriculture has been in decline in New England, depending on how you look at it, for 100 or 150 years. And it continues to go down. At best, it's kind of stable, depending on what the federal government does with the price of milk and what world prices for potatoes might be and things like that. The growth that's been occurring in agriculture has been occurring principally in this other track. And in places like Maine, it's a very similar experience in Vermont, in parts of Massachusetts, principally Western Mass and Southeastern Mass, there's been a huge resurgence in this local agriculture. The numbers in Maine are pretty impressive. We've gone the last 10 years from about 7,000 farms to over 8,200 farms. And at the same time, our acres in production have gone up about 8%. So it's not just large farms that are getting lost and a lot of small new ones are coming in. Overall agricultural production is increasing. So on this track, on this local agricultural track, things are actually expanding and being revitalized at a pace that's fast enough to take away any of the losses that are occurring on the commodity track. Pretty impressive. Now, it looks a little different in all of New England, because in a lot of New England, there isn't that commodity track remaining yet. Only there's a dairy farm left in Rhode Island, for instance. Not many in Massachusetts or Connecticut. But the overall perspective is still the same. So I think you get the idea. So that's kind of where agriculture is now. A lot of people think there's a lot of promise on that local agricultural track. I want to make sure you understand that you shouldn't think of the commodity track as what's old and what's past, and the local agricultural track as what's hot and hip and new in the future. I think it's a lot more complicated than that. We don't have the time to go into it. But I will tell you that both tracks are mutually reinforcing. You could not have a small farm in Maine raising goats and making a high-quality goat cheese to sell at the local farmer's market if there were not commodity dairy farms nearby which makes their grain prices affordable. You need the infrastructure. On the other side, these larger farms, they can't necessarily convert overnight to local agriculture. You have a potato farm in Aroostook County farming, that's far northern Maine, farming 400 acres. They're producing on that single farm. 400 acres is not that large. Again, by national definitions, it's a fairly small farm. But they're growing 10,000 pounds of potatoes. Excuse me, 10 million pounds of potatoes in a single year. You can't sell all of that locally. But those farmers are looking what's happening in local agriculture, and they are sometimes coming up with very, creative strategies. I can think of one farm where in addition to their 300 or 400 acres of conventional grown potatoes, they're putting in 20 or 30 acres of heirloom variety organic potatoes that they're dealing with a wholesaler and selling to mostly to Portland and Boston restaurants. A lot of exciting things going on in agriculture. So that's sort of a snapshot of where things are. But let's take a step back for a moment, because if agriculture principally is in decline, and if this local agriculture isn't really that big yet, there's really a fundamental question here. Does it make sense to be growing all these food products in a rocky, cold place like New England? Well, if you step back and look at the fundamentals, my perspective is New England is actually a great place to farm. Let's look at it. First off, we have land. We don't often get credit for how much land we have that is available for agriculture. We have about 4 million acres in the New England area which are rated prime soils or soils of statewide importance. You could grow an awful lot of crops on 4 million acres. You could feed all of the vegetable and fruit needs of New England on 1 million acres. We've got 4 million that are potentially available. So we have land. It's not like the Midwest where it's huge tracts of beautiful stone-free soil, but there's good soil in pockets scattered all across New England, and it adds up to something significant. Point two, we have water in abundance. I mean, you don't have to dig too far into food issues to realize that so much of the food we eat comes from places where it's being grown with water in systems that are completely unsustainable. Whether it's the far west where people are fighting over water rights on rivers, or be it the plains where they're drawing water from a 50 million year aquifer, which will be depleted in our lifetimes. It doesn't matter, but we've got it here. And even with a changing climate, if you look at all the forecasts, we're going to continue to stay wet. So water, critical. The third thing that we have is good growing conditions. Now that really surprises people, right? Now I live 3.5 hours north of here. I live almost at the 45th parallel. And what I always tell people in talks is, 45 degrees, that's only halfway to 90. We're only halfway to the North Pole. It's not that cold. But seriously, follow that line of latitude across to Europe. Where does it come out? Provence, France, the Po Valley in Italy, highly productive agricultural regions. Southern New England, draw the line, you're in southern Italy. And the point is, it is less temperature in more sunlight that determines what you are capable of growing. And we can compete with some very prominent agricultural regions for sunlight. And I won't go into the details, but there's been a whole range of low-tech season extension strategies, some using greenhouses, many using techniques that don't involve fossil fuels at all for season extension. That side can be done. So we have land, we have water. What did I just mention? Sunlight, good growing conditions. What else do we have? We have people. We have markets. We have people who care about what they eat, care about the communities they live in, care about the connections between the food that they eat and those people. There's this kind of sense in the back of some people's mind, well, New England can't grow all its food because New England is too populated. And yet it is that population that makes agriculture possible. You got to flip that around. If we're serious about sustainable agriculture, we have to be serious about growing food close to where people are going to use it. I could go on and on in that realm, but I don't have the time. So that's a summary of sort of why there's opportunities for the future. Now, what's a vision for the future? There's a lot of them out there. I'm going to share one. This comes from a friend of mine, Brian Donahue. Brian is a professor at Brandeis. He's also affiliated with the Harvard Forest. And Brian has been working for years on the sort of big picture look at the forests in New England and how they can be sustainable. And since he also dabbles in farming and hangs out occasionally with people like me, he's now applied some of those same techniques to looking at the overall food system. And Brian has been developing, with input from a lot of people, a system for growing 80% of our food products by the year 2060, so roughly 50 years from now. 80% of our needs here in New England, and examining what that would take. Now, when I say 80%, that includes all of our fruits and vegetables, pretty much, with the exception of some exotic things that we'd want to import. No one's saying we don't drink coffee, or we don't drink wine, or we don't eat chocolate. But can we get a lot of what we need grown here? He's talking about all the fruits and vegetables, all of the meats, some of the grain, some of the oils. Certainly fish is a big part of it, and another place where we have a real advantage here in New England. What are his assumptions behind doing this? The first assumption is that New England's population will roughly stay fairly constant. It's about 4.5 million people now. He's estimating it will go up to about 16 or 17 million, which is in line with current projections. The second thing that he assumes is, to the extent that there is growth, it will be smart growth. It will not be growth that will take away from fertile land that could be used for growing food. And a third assumption he makes on all this is that food prices elsewhere, as costs are internalized, will continue to go up. And a fourth assumption that he makes is we will eat a somewhat healthier diet. More fruits and vegetables, less red meat, probably about the same level of poultry and dairy as we do now. And he's gone through very meticulously and looked at the acreage available and the kind of acreage all through New England and said, what can we do? And the answer is, we could have about 6 million acres in New England in production, and that would serve all those needs that I just talked about. So it's certainly doable. It's not really that complicated even to do it, if you look at the rough numbers. And I have to tell you, Brian has a bias. He's a forester. And that means he really doesn't want to see any land that has trees on it now return to the agricultural production it had on it 50 or 100 years ago, when southern New England was 95% cleared. So he's talking about still keeping a very healthy, robust forestry infrastructure as well. You could go further. In my mind, you could go beyond that 6 million. You can go to 7, you can go to 8 million acres. So you could definitely have a system, a food system in this region that followed sustainable practices and in essence served the population not only of today, but what we envision that population to be in the future. It's really exciting. So what stands in the way? A lot of things. Some of them are political. A lot of them are economic. A lot of them are human nature. And we don't have the time to go into all of that, but I'm going to touch on a couple of things. The work I do in Maine, and I've been doing for 16, 17 years in Maine, has really been designed, well, early on it was designed to help farmers find markets and be economically successful. In the last 10 years, it's been designed to make sure, as we've seen an increase in the demand for local farm products, to make sure there's opportunities for new farmers coming into the business. Huge issue. There's a lot of young people who want to farm. The biggest barrier is the affordability of that land. It's kind of odd that with farming, we pay a developer's price as an incoming farmer. You have to pay a developer's price for land that you never intend to develop. Creates a very odd dynamic. And so I'm actively involved in work of farmland preservation for the purpose not of just protecting land. My organization cares about that and cares about that environmental ethic. But the principal reason we're doing that, the principal reason we're protecting that land, is because protected land with a well-placed agricultural easement on it will sell in the future will transfer in the future at its value as farmland as opposed to developable land. And that makes a huge difference on the economics going forward. We're not going to have to worry about this, in my mind, in 25 or 30 or 50 years. In 25 or 50 years, economic reality is going to be such that it's clear that the best use of farmland, the highest and best use is for growing food. But right now, we're in this place, we haven't internalized all those externalities, we don't take into account the full cost of food, and the system is broken. I was writing an article for Maine Policy Review this spring, and I had a writer's block, and I felt the need to go to my bookshelf and find something that would help me. And I pulled out a book that was really eye-opening to me about 22 years ago when it came out, called For the Common Good by Herman Daly and John Cobb. It was really the treatise that got the ecological economics movement going. And I found a dog-eared page in that I'm going to read to you here. Not the page, don't worry. The quote. If I can find the right page. Here we go. If economics is to be reconceived in the service of community, it will begin with the concern for agriculture, and specifically for the production of food. Now, Daly and Cobb wrote about a whole bunch of stuff, a big treatise, and they didn't talk much about agriculture, but they recognized the importance of agriculture, both symbolically and as a practical means to bring about some of these ends. I see the renewed interest in agriculture as being a lot broader than food. As important as it is that we get nutritional local food on people's tables, it's more than that. As important that it is that we have an ecologically sound, healthy landscape, this is bigger than that. As important as it is that distressed rural areas of New England can have a new economic engine, this is more important than that. Within farming lies an opportunity for us to get it right, for us to do things differently. I would profess that within our farms lies an opportunity for us to create the only kind of future that we are going to want to live in. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you.